When Shaun Cassidy first stepped into the spotlight in the late 1970s, he looked like the perfect American dream. Bright smile, clean-cut looks, and a voice that could charm millions. To the outside world, he was a wholesome teen idol, selling millions of records and starring as Joe Hardy in The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew Mysteries. But behind the carefully polished image, Cassidy was living a double life, one that revealed the darker cost of being a young star in Hollywood. Born on September 27, 1958, in Los Angeles, Cassidy came from a famous family. His mother, Shirley Jones, was an Oscar-winning actress, while his father, Jack Cassidy, was a celebrated Broadway star. On paper, it was the kind of glamorous Hollywood lineage many would envy. In reality, however, home life was fractured. Jack battled bipolar disorder, heavy drinking, and violent outbursts that created chaos inside the household. For young Shaun, childhood meant living with constant tension, sometimes comic, often frightening, and always unpredictable. Worse still, he grew up under the shadow of his half-brother, David Cassidy. By the early 1970s, David was one of the biggest teen idols in the world, raking in millions and receiving mountains of fan mail each week. For Shaun, it was a daily reminder of his own invisibility. Even their mother seemed more visible on screen as David's TV mom than as Shaun's parent at home. That imbalance bred a quiet bitterness that would follow him throughout his career. When Shaun's father died tragically in a 1976 fire, the trauma imprinted itself deeply. He was just 18 when he stood outside the charred apartment, facing the blackened walls and the haunting smell of smoke. His father's melted gold ring became a symbol of destruction, a reminder of the instability that fame and excess could bring. That darkness stayed with him. Yet, Hollywood didn't want Shaun Cassidy's darkness. It wanted his smile. When he broke out with his #1 single, "Do Ron Ron," in 1977, the machine of teen stardom swallowed him whole. Fake romances, staged photo shoots, exhausting concert schedules, and suffocating fan attention left him drained. Cassidy had dreams of telling real, difficult stories about trauma, abuse, and injustice. But the networks only wanted clean fun. His role as Joe Hardy became less of a career break and more of a gilded cage. By the time the Hardy Boys hit television screens in 1977, Shaun Cassidy was already living the contradictions of his career. The show was a hit, attracting over 20 million viewers with its mix of mystery, charm, and teenage appeal. To audiences, Cassidy seemed perfectly cast as Joe Hardy, the clean-cut younger brother, solving crimes with effortless ease. But for Cassidy himself, the role was a frustration. He wanted the stories to go deeper. At just 19, Cassidy was already pushing writers and producers to explore themes of alcoholism, police corruption, and the real struggles teenagers faced. But every request was shot down. ABC executives, terrified of alienating advertisers, refused to let him take the show anywhere near reality. The Hardy Boys had to remain safe. Fun adventures with no messy truths. For Cassidy, who had grown up with domestic chaos and personal trauma, it felt dishonest. The pressure behind the scenes only made things worse. Filming schedules were brutal. 18-hour days, 6 days a week, often with dangerous stunts and little safety oversight. Cassidy himself collapsed on set from dehydration, while his co-star Parker Stevenson once broke his arm during a motorcycle scene. Exhaustion and stress were constant. Meanwhile, Cassidy was also juggling a skyrocketing music career, recording albums, and touring internationally. At his peak, he was performing up to 200 shows a year, often on only a few hours of sleep. But his attempts to reinvent himself artistically fell flat. His darker rock album, Under Wraps, 1978, failed commercially, and critics dismissed it as an awkward attempt to escape his bubblegum image. On stage, things became frightening. At Madison Square Garden in 1979, fans stormed the stage, ripping his clothes and hair. He suffered a panic attack in front of thousands. Even worse, death threats and break-ins followed, forcing him to hire professional security at just 20 years old. Cassidy began to see his career for what it was: a trap. He was a commodity, a brand built on an image that didn't belong to him. He had stories he wanted to tell, stories rooted in pain, survival, and the darker corners of human nature. But the system only wanted him to stay young, sweet, and silent. That realization marked the beginning of his long struggle to take back creative control. By 1980, Shaun Cassidy was at a crossroads. The Hardy Boys had collapsed under falling ratings, creative conflicts, and misguided attempt to make the show darker without substance. Cassidy had fought hard for realism, stories about broken families, trauma, and social issues, but the network never allowed it. Instead, the final season veered into uneven tones, blending FBI plots, Russian defectors, and drug cases, alienating both parents and kids. The cancellation was inevitable. For Cassidy, however, the cancellation was not just the end of a show. It was liberation. He had spent years being told who to be, how to sing, and even who to love in staged romances. Now, he was desperate to prove that he was more than just a pretty face on a poster. His attempts to shift toward darker material were bold, but risky. In 1980, he released Wasp, an album filled with covers of David Bowie and Talking Heads, produced with Todd Rundgren. It was meant to shed the teen idol skin and announce Cassidy as a serious musician. Instead, it backfired. Critics dismissed it as forced and inauthentic, and sales barely scratched the surface. Warner Brothers dropped him soon after. The failure cut deep. Cassidy wanted to be taken seriously, but the industry only wanted him frozen in his teenage prime. So he turned to acting, hoping Broadway would give him credibility. In 1981, he joined Mass Appeal, a drama that critics thought showcased real talent. But audiences weren't ready to see the Hardy Boy in a serious role. As soon as his name appeared on the marquee, theatergoers walked out. Ticket sales crashed, and within weeks the play was shut down. Cassidy's name, once his ticket to fame, had become a curse. By the mid-1980s, his career seemed trapped in limbo. He shocked fans with a stint on General Hospital as Dusty Walker, a manipulative criminal. The backlash was intense. Thousands of angry letters poured in, and the storyline was cut short. Cassidy later admitted he had done it deliberately, a way of proving he could play darker roles, even if it cost him fans. It was a gamble that paid off in the long run. Cassidy was slowly carving out a new identity, not as a teen idol, but as a storyteller unafraid of shadows. His next move would prove that point. By the mid-1990s, Shaun Cassidy had finally begun to reclaim his voice. After years of failed albums, canceled shows, and public scrutiny, he turned to creating and producing television on his own terms. In 1995, American Gothic premiered on CBS, a dark, unsettling series, unlike anything Cassidy had done before. Gone was the innocent teen idol. In its place was a creator unafraid to explore human darkness, psychological trauma, and moral ambiguity. American Gothic opened with brutal, shocking narratives: a young girl murdered, a father driven to suicide, and a sheriff capable of horrific violence while masking a cheerful demeanor. Network executives were horrified, and many questioned whether the show could survive. Critics, however, recognized Cassidy's vision. The New York Times praised the series as the most original new show of the season, while fans noted the intense, gripping performances. Although ratings were modest, the series earned a cult following and established Cassidy as a creative force in television. This success was a turning point. Cassidy's journey from teen idol to mature storyteller illustrated the long-term consequences of early fame and creative suppression. Whereas the Hardy Boys demanded a safe, sanitized image, American Gothic allowed Cassidy to channel his life experiences, the chaos of his childhood, the pressure of stardom, and the trauma of loss, into his work. For the first time, he was telling the stories he had always wanted to tell. Even later, Cassidy continued to apply this philosophy. From 2018 to 2023, he served as executive producer on New Amsterdam, a mainstream medical drama that subtly incorporated darker, more complex themes without losing broad audience appeal. The show ran for 5 seasons, earned Emmy nominations, and generated over $200 million in syndication. Cassidy, now financially secure and creatively satisfied, reflected that the thrill of success had never been in fame itself. It was in control over the stories he told. Despite offers to reboot his early teen projects for massive paychecks, Cassidy repeatedly declined, insisting that scripts be true to real teenage emotion and complexity. He refused to compromise his artistic vision. In this way, Shaun Cassidy's career became both a cautionary tale about the pressures of young stardom and a testament to perseverance. From teen heartthrob to cult television visionary, he transformed personal trauma into creative power, leaving a lasting impact on the television landscape.